All right, welcome to the Airiam Podcast. This podcast covers topics related to cyber and human resilience. It's geared towards owners and CEOs of small to medium-sized companies, as well as IT and cybersecurity leaders. My name is Bill Bowman, and I am the Director of Marketing at Airiam. The topic for today is related to compliance frameworks. So technical folks are likely familiar with NIST, ISO 27001, SOC 2, but for the owner of everyday smaller to medium-sized companies that may or may not be required to comply with the framework is investing the time into following a framework worthwhile. We're going to discuss today. Our guest to help us get through it is Rob Carson. So Rob is the founder and CEO of Semper Sec. He's a Marine Corp Veteran, a regular speaker at popular cybersecurity events, and he helps companies design and implement successful information security and compliance programs. Rob is also the host of the Blue Team Warriors podcast, so this is familiar ground for Rob in discussing all these topics. So Semper Sec is a cybersecurity consulting firm that helps small to medium-sized businesses build security programs and navigate compliance to stay competitive. So that was a mouthful, but yeah, Rob, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks, Bill, for having me. I really appreciate it.
Great. So Rob, before we kick things off and talk about the exciting topic of compliance, we like to start every episode with the same question to get to know you a little bit better on the personal side. How do you start your mornings? It's pretty early where you are right now, right in Colorado.
It's 7 a.m.
This is how you're starting it today.
I'd like to be honest and tell you I get up and run 5 miles every day, but probably some Copenhagen and Red Bull. And then I try to do a little PT because it's good for the mental health. But honestly, I do that and then I go read the news, see what's going on in the world.
So not much has changed from the Marine Corps to the civilian world in terms of how you get started. Maybe the time.
Some of those daily habits, yeah. Although I feel like when I was in the Marine Corps, I would pay attention more to TMZ and stuff that was not news because I was living the news at the time. So, but yeah, absolutely.
So after you hit the ground running, then you start at Semper Sec. You're all about the compliance framework. So taking a step back, taking a big picture, how did these frameworks come about? You know, the different ones have different things that spurred their creation. What's been the genesis of the frameworks?
So it's interesting. So what it was that nobody was managing security holistically. So people started coming up with different ways where we could essentially look at security across the board and help figure out what are you doing. Basically, it's almost like creating checklists, right? Like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing this? What are the best practices? And putting all of those things kind of on a sheet. And then where it's evolved today, though, for being honest, everybody's special, just ask them. So you got COVID, you got NIST, and you got NIST 171. And then even inside of NIST, you have the FAA will create one for drones, and they'll take somebody's thing and kind of repackage it. And now you have the states are doing that too, right? So you have state ramp, but then, as a Longhorn, you can appreciate that in Texas is Texas, so they have Tex ramp. And now Arizona has Arizona ramp, which is still basically the same thing as state ramp, but everyone's special. So now it's almost gotten kind of crazy. It's hard to keep up with all those things. But essentially, the genesis is, how do you run a program holistically and know what you're not doing?
So there's the same concept and a lot of the same controls, the same elements, but different agencies, different organizations, different governments, different non-government organizations. They all want to kind of put their own little spin on it.
They do. And then, and it's not bad because they're also trying to be more prescriptive potentially where required. You look at FedRAMP, and FedRAMP has some pretty specific things on how they want you to do stuff. It's pretty strict standards, but you are guarding federal government information. It is a target. So they they can do that, but not everybody's guarding nuclear codes, and that's where like ISO is. I'm a big fan of ISO, but we can talk about that. But yeah, it's all the different frameworks. They're all the same but different, if that makes sense. Like 75% of those frameworks are going to be very, very similar. They're going to require risk assessment. They're going to require governance. They're going to require identity and access. But how they're implemented and how you're evaluated against them is what is different.
So you mentioned FedRAMP, you mentioned ISO. So what do you see most often for, I guess you have two categories, or a lot of categories, but some might be companies that they're not required to do any frameworks. And then you have, if a cloud provider, that's FedRAMP, correct? Is that?
So that's if you're selling to the federal government. But that's a different market. And that's an expensive cert, because like just the audit alone can cost $150,000, the actual certification on it. Like it's not something people just go lightly into. But a lot of times what I see with customers is usually it's required. Nobody does this stuff for fun, if we're being honest. You're doing it because your customers expect it. The smart companies will, even if they're not required, will start to adopt a framework, and we can talk about which ones I would adopt based on not being required to do something. But a lot of, on the commercial side, I see SOC 2 and I see ISO, because if you're doing B2B, a lot of people ask for SOC 2, especially dealing with publicly traded companies. I think that's starting to become maybe not valued as much. ISO, what I like about ISO, ISO works internationally, and the nice part about ISO is that NIST maps it to ISO. So what's great about ISO is if you've adopted an ISO program, you can pick up a new framework far easier than it is to go from some of these other standards. Like going from SOC 2 to NIST is not as easy, I think, personally, as it is to go from ISO to NIST, because like NIST, they've done a direct mapping. So what control meets what control. So you're able to just then add on a few other controls, if that makes sense.
Definitely. So taking even a step back, the whole purpose of the frameworks are to provide a structure and a logic to information security. So when you're talking with companies, talking with leaders at companies, what do you see as the benefits of having that structure versus having no structure? So if someone going for an ISO, then they have a structure. Before they didn't have a structure. I'm saying structure. But what's the benefit? Why would we talked about if it's required. If it's not required, there's also. But
you're tailoring the risk, right? So like, what's great about the structure, like ISO and NIST, like they both allow you some leeway so that you're not putting in man traps if that's not your risk, right? So you're able to put in the controls based on the risk, but you're also able to know what you're not doing, right? And go, you know what, this isn't that big of a deal. I can buy employees LifeLock. I can't buy them new jobs. I'm going to worry about this later, because there's only so much time and budget. That's not to say that a company doesn't care about its employee data, but at the end of the day, like they care about employing the people. Like, and you need to, it helps you prioritize the things, because there's so much, I call it the cybersecurity industrial complex. Actually, I can't say I coined that term. I think Keith McCammon did at Red Canary, but there's so much cyber stuff out there, FUD. Oh, you got to buy this. Oh my gosh, it's going to buy this. And like, what's great about having a framework is that you can figure out, what do you actually need? And then you can do a lot with good people and process. And then where do I need to augment, right? Do I need an Airiam because like I have a solution, or I don't have the staff. I need someone to do the triage because I don't have that expertise, or I need pen testing, or I need identity and access, but maybe I don't need an email security gateway. Like there's different, helping you prioritize your risks to decide what matters. Like that's why you have these frameworks, and that's the value prop.
Yeah, if you don't have
if they're done right,
if you're just going to go blindly, I'm going to buy this. This salesperson sold me on this. This person sold me that. Oh, I saw this in Gartner. I'm going to get that. The framework kind of ties you to reality.
And that's for people who do it right. A lot of times people try to check a block. To be fair, Like like I said, nobody does this for fun. So like there's minimum viable compliance, but to be honest, minimum viable compliance is better than no compliance. And like, but you're right, like that prioritization, like that's where like what's nice about like Semper Sec, we don't sell software. So like when we sit there and go through and help a company put in their program, I'm like, I don't care what you get. Like, hey, we need to solve this problem. Here are our options. Like you can try to do triage on your own. Do you have the staff and are you going to train them? Maybe not. Like maybe we go get an MSSP that can do that for us. Like, who, and is that our biggest risk? Or is our biggest risk that we just don't have encrypted laptops? And like right now, we don't have to worry about China or anybody. We just need to worry about, stupid humans leaving a laptop at Starbucks and having a reportable breach, right? Like where are we at on that maturity scale? And everyone starts like at the basics, if that makes sense.
Nice.
Yeah, is this, and I understand, this podcast is more towards, some small businesses. So like, don't feel bad. Like I've seen Christmas trees in the data center. I've had to step over the sodas to get to the server rack. You're not, I like to tell you you're special, but you're not that special.
Nice. So we talked a bit about it earlier. So the different categories. So the needing to start, no one's doing it for fun. So if you're provide products and services to the DoD, you're required. In what cases are people required to adhere to a framework, follow a framework? And then I guess the other category will be everyone else who's not required, but it's
great question. So if you have, so we'll talk government first. So if you sell to the federal government or are in that supply chain, you're going to have a requirement to meet NIST 800-171. And you'll have to submit your SPRS score is what it's called. If you are actually handling controlled unclassified information or CUI, which you'll hear, at some point you're going to be required to meet what is CMMC. Now that's your basic. You're handling data in some way, shape, or form. You might also, in that case, you probably have ITAR or some export stuff because you might be a manufacturer of tools, right? You make sprockets. Like you would have a requirement to make sure that stuff's secure and that data is secure. It's now, if you go up the stack, let's say you have a cloud service offering. Once you have a cloud service offering, your cloud service provider, now you're talking FedRAMP. And that's, and the good part is not military, but the government has done, I think, a decent job in the level of pain is reflective of the risk, if that makes sense.
Right. There's different tiers, I know, for CMMC. So based on, what is it based on? So
the tiers are, well, so it's funny is right now they went back to 3.
Oh, okay.
So there's CMMC 2.0. There was 5 tiers. Now there's 3 tiers. They still haven't pushed out the final rule. Like, so that, and the government moves super fast. Just, everyone knows that. But like, what I would focus on is 171 and then maturing that program, whether CMMC is being enforced or not, you still have a obligation to have a program and be meeting NIST 800-171, especially if you're in the DoD, selling to the DoD with DFARS. You still have an obligation to protect that data. So following NIST 800-171, which is basically CMMC, what CMMC 2.0 or level 2, which was the level 3, which is where most people were going to fall, is the new level 2. And you start putting some metrics around how you're monitoring and measuring the effectiveness of those controls. If you're doing that, you're pretty much going to be set. And what's good about CMMC, or what they've done, which is something I always loved about ISO, is you're not graded. It used to be more you were graded pass fail if you were perfect or not. What I love about ISO is you're graded on how well you're running the program. NIST has adopted some of that where they're saying, hey, it's okay that you're not perfect. We need you to tell us where you're not perfect. Tell us what your plan is to fix it. But it's okay that you're not perfect.
Gotcha. So I guess I'm going to learn a couple things today. Yeah. So NIST, my understanding is that NIST is just a publication that the government puts out that's kind of optional for companies and organizations to adhere to, and they print it out. It's a couple 100-page PDF, and they got it. But who is kind of testing people's NIST compliance?
Good question. Yeah, so they have what are called 3 PAOs, third-party auditors, basically, and you have 2 different types now. Sorry, I said Copenhagen Red Bull. I've got my Monster right now.
There you go. Juices.
So, basically, you get assessed by a 3 PAO. Is what will happen. It's what happens with FedRAMP. It's what will happen with CMMC. And basically, these are companies that have demonstrated that they know how to certify and have a audit program and the qualifications to check you. But you can also be checked by your prime, by your contractor. I mean, that's the thing is like most of these frameworks get required due to contractual requirements, whether you're selling to the federal government or you're selling to a commercial business. Like if your customers are going to dictate you having something. They're going to put something in. Like, and then my advice for that too is that sometimes they don't know. The cybersecurity industrial complex is strong. People like to say a lot of buzzwords and they play bingo with it. It's great, right?
Oh yeah.
So it's okay to push back and go, hey, I'm not SOC 2, but I have ISO. Like people are just putting down what they know, or what they've heard of sometimes. But, and you know, it's funny, you talk about NIST. So yeah, NIST is a set of standards. Government just publishes these things like, hey, here's some good stuff. And then it's really what's happening is state and local agencies, state governments, federal government takes those standards and says, we want you to follow this. Or a company might say, we want you to follow ISO. Like if you go to like Microsoft to be a partner there, they're looking for ISO certifications. Or especially for the privacy side, or you have to demonstrate your security program. That's why people do this is that, and I would tell you, what I do steer people away from though, is if you don't have a NIST requirement, I wouldn't start with NIST.
Okay.
And the reason why is it's going to be more prescriptive. And if you have no program, you're going to have to mature fairly fast. I would start with ISO where you can tailor, you have much more flexibility in how you meet those controls, but it does force you to actually run a program. Because that's what's great about ISO is you're really, if you think about an audit, right? You're going to be audited. Let's say you have in ISO, you have like they call it the stage 2, but that's where they review your evidence. You're going to spend like 2 days on clauses, which is basically the framework, how you run the program, and then 2 days maybe on 114 controls on the 2013 standard. Like those, so it kind of tells you where that level of focus is, if that makes sense. Like you want to, but yeah, like I love NIST, and NIST 171 is great. The problem with some of these frameworks is they don't really, they give you a list of things to do or things you need to do, but they don't necessarily, they make it difficult. NIST in particular can be confusing.
Okay.
Like if you're confused on what is what, like you are not alone, brother. Like there are times where I'm like, huh? But like, because you have NIST 853 R5, right? And then basically NIST 171 is a subset of 853.
Yeah.
And then you have NIST 171 Alpha, which is like how you audit it. Like there's all these different, it's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of soup. But yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So
I get excited. I could go on for days.
So ISO is a little bit easier. It is easier to kind of pick up for a smaller or medium-sized business, unless you're required by.
Unless you're required.
Yeah.
And I would still put in an ISO backbone because, like, even when we help companies, like we try to we adopt some of the ISO best practices into putting in the NIST 800-171 program. Because like I can take the NIST 800-171 controls, because they're a list of they're good controls. I got no problem with that. But where we help is also on how do you maintain this program? Like you can implement it, but you can't stop.
Yeah.
You got to maintain this program, and you're going to have problems. Your vendor's going to do something stupid. You're going to do something stupid. The laws are going to change. Your business is going to change. So how do we maintain that program and not fall victim to we can't change it. We got it this way. This is what we do. It's like, well, we used to do bloodletting. We don't do that anymore. Like, but yeah, that's a good question.
So I guess kind of wrapping up the topic of why to do it. So there's, as we've talked, it seems like there's two categories. One, it's a law. If you don't follow the law, you might get fined money. What GDPR, HIPAA, GLBA safeguards rule, that's the law the government does. And if you don't follow it, then you got to pay a fine, right? And then the other one is it's you could say required. It's required for your business purposes. If you don't do it, you're going to not have a customer. You're not going to have the ability to do business with the government. PCI, if you don't follow the credit card standards, you're going to get fined. You're going to
have a problem.
Also, and it's a kind of
exactly
like CMMC and all those. Yeah.
There's lots of reasons why to do it, and I would say for companies that don't have a pressing obligation, it's coming. Like, if nothing else, your cyber insurance is going to if you start filling out for cyber insurance these days, they start asking you a ton of questions. But do you have these things? Like, so it's going to get you one way or the other. Now, whether you're paying to go get certified or not, that's a different thing. But you can still, and think about the level of pain, those preventative actions, like by putting in that program, like you're not hack proof. That doesn't exist. Like if your adversary can launch satellites, you have big problems.
You're in trouble.
You had problems, but you can't outrun your competitors, because like unless you're directly targeted for your industry, more than likely you're going to be attacked because of random acts of hacking. Someone's going to find a vulnerability, or they're going to run scans across the internet, see what they can do, and then start poking if you seem interesting or seem an easy target. All right. The other thing I would add is you can get fined with ITAR. ITAR is the one piece that, at Semper Sec, we made sure we brought in a hardcore ITAR export control, security expert, because that's the one thing that puts you in jail. Talk about fines.
That's
fines
serious
fine.
Stuff.
You don't want to screw up compliance on ITAR. I'm just throwing that out there. That's a thing.
So that's exporting related items to other countries.
Yeah, so basically it started. It's the munitions list, but then what happens is that they will classify plans as ITAR, or encryption can be considered ITAR. So it's not just M4s and guns and stuff like that. It's also certain technologies and know-how can be classified. Those are rules that it's a much bigger deal. Like I said, you can go to jail for that. It's a thing. A HIPAA fine would sound pleasurable compared to dealing with ITAR.
Yeah, it's serious stuff. So we've talked about how the frameworks came about, talked about the different frameworks, why different ones might be more beneficial, the reasons why people do it. So, and then the actual process. So, Rob, when you've worked with probably tons of companies, dozens, hundreds, I don't know. What's the process like? What are the tough spots that companies often face? And what tips would you have, either doing it on their own or working with a partner? So,
obviously I am jaded, where I think you should work with a partner, but where I tell you to start, this is where people screw up. They like with ISO, they skip the clauses, which because it has a lot of words written by European lawyers, probably the same people who wrote GDPR,
and then translated a couple times, right?
Exactly. And where you could have used 2 words, they use 10, but they skip that part and they go straight to the control list, and they just start implementing stuff. But if you don't have because this is what the framework is important, is how are you going to write your documents? How are you going to audit your documents? What are you going to do when people aren't following your processes, right? So I would tell people, build that framework. And because I've done it the wrong way. I know what it's like to roll out an acceptable use policy right off the bat, but if I don't have a process to validate its functioning and how I'm going to train against it, how I'm going to make sure and what do we do when it doesn't work anymore, or we need an exception, or someone's not following it. If I don't have those things in place, I've got a sweet kitchen, but I have no roof. So I would say that's a big piece. The other part is like, don't spend too much time defining this. Draw pictures. Like we draw pictures for our customers because words are hard. No one knows how to read anymore. I was a Marine. Like I need my crayons, but like we'll draw a workflow, right? And don't worry about trying to boil the ocean. This is why like the frameworks are useful, and they're doing a risk assessment correctly should help you prioritize which things matter most to you. You know, and if I was giving general guidance, I would tell you identity and access management, vulnerability management. And for you IT people, it's not patch management, it's vulnerability management. Sometimes you got to disable SMB1, you got to some config stuff maybe. And then governance. And if you do those three things, if you have governance where you're checking, you're doing your access reviews, and you have multi-factor authentication, and you're managing your vulnerabilities in a timely manner, you are going to be steps ahead of anybody.
Nice. So for our listeners out there, they said they're motivated, they're ready to do it. How long does it take? I guess there's a lot of variability in that answer, but an average medium-sized company, they don't really have much in the way of structure or governance. They need to do NIST or CMMC. What are we looking at? What are they looking at here in terms of a commitment of time?
I would tell you it takes the amount of time you give it. If you want it done, like most of the time, we can get a company usually from start to finish to their certification for something in about 6 months. You can go faster, but there's only so much change an organization can absorb. So like we can help you put the program in, but you have to follow the thing, right? And the thing is, like, what you got to understand is when you start rolling out a program, it's not going to work perfectly at first. Things aren't going to. So like that's why you want to give yourself some time to figure out that flow. Like, how do you do software requests? How do we make that process efficient? How do we get to yes as fast as we can for things that matter, or educate the user on like, no, you can't have Steam on your company laptop. Like, or Pokemon, Bill, you're probably a Candy Crush guy. I'm not here to judge.
Pokemon Go, I got that. I've read of it.
I mean, you are a Longhorn, like, it is what it is. Like, yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Like
Candy Crush threw us off on there.
Candy Crush totally messed me up. But yeah,
kind of like actually, this is another dynamic is right. Writing it down and actually doing it to be secure. Mm-hmm. So not just the checkbox mentality. So that's the key. It might take longer.
Absolutely. And the key to that success of moving it up the speed or hitting the 6 months is top management commitment. You have to have your bosses on board. Like, so Semper Sec, we are ISO 27001 and 27701 certified, which is the privacy cert. So my little company is certified. I don't even like necessarily going to my committee meetings. Like it's, and this is what we do for a living. So like you have to have that top management commitment, like where they're going to show up and they're going to provide that input, and your program is going to have some budget. Like if without your leadership on board, that's you're really going to have a hard time. And that's the good thing. And the thing is like, I guess one piece of advice, and this is why I like the way we do risk assessment. You can't go to your executive team talking about bits and bytes. Nobody cares. Don't nerd them out. Like I gotta, people that build computers, like that's cool, but they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about the business. So you need to talk business risk, talk about the P&L, talk about what the CFO cares about, talk about what those lines of business care about. Don't waste time. The hackers are coming. So what? Like now, that to be said, if they do care about that the hackers are coming, they come to you with that stuff. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And be like, oh, you're right. We gotta take care of that. I need this, sir. Like,
yeah. Talk about things not in terms that the board understands or the owners. So that's
they understand that their money is at stake. That's why like employee data isn't sexy, but customers' data, stuff that'll shut down the business, is.
Nice. Great. So I think we got a lot of good takeaways from the talk about how the framework started, reasons to do the frameworks, kind of the nuances there, how to get started, what to look out for in those tips. Anything else, Rob? Anything to leave people with?
I would say like sometimes this is why you want to bring in a partner. I've done it myself. So having done it the other way around, the reason why I built Semper Sec was I built it to take the load off the blue team, right? Because you're already busy. You're dealing with stupid things. You got salespeople letting their kids use their laptop for homework, and now the Roblox is installed or whatever. Like, you have all of these things. Like, using a third party to help move you along, and find a third party that will actually do, not just pontificate,
not just consult.
Yes, it's like because like that doesn't help you, right? But the other thing is the consultant can say the same thing you said, but we're suddenly brilliant because we're a consultant. But don't be afraid to leverage that.
Definitely cool. Well, Rob, I want to thank you again for your time today. For more information on Semper Sec, it's on a shirt. If you're watching the video, visit sempersec.com. For more information on Airiam, visit airiam.com. Thank you.